Welcome to this episode of the Ministry Show. We're now at the final habit, monitoring. We've talked about recruiting and then training people that we've recruited, placing them properly in ministry, and then, of course, supporting them in ministry. It occurs to me that we call these the 5 habits, but they're really fundamentals that we need to practice enough that they become disciplines and then they become habits. But wherever you're at in that sequence, whether you consider them fundamentals or disciplines that you're trying to put into your ministry, or you're to the point of where they're just habitual for you, we're at the last one, and this is to monitor. It's kind of the glue that holds all the other 4 together. I'm looking forward to getting into it with you, Pam, because monitoring is a sweet spot for you.
Yes, it is. So here's an outline of today's show, and I think by the end of the show, you're going to agree that monitoring in ministry is not only valuable, but it is exciting. We want to expect what our ministry and people need in order to create the results that we expect. So measuring and monitoring and checking is a good thing. It creates confidence, which I need that in order to be more effective because you know the current condition of your flock and ministry as well as your monitoring. Would you agree, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, monitoring, inspect what you expect. And I like to see results. So, I need to inspect ministry and I gain confidence when I have the facts. If I don't have the facts, I don't know, Chris, it's just I don't have the confidence that I need. So, in ministry, we might think that inspecting is a harsh thing, but we need to inspect the things that are important to us. When we inspect, we intentionally know what's going on. We do this in all areas of life. So, why should it be different in kingdom work? Especially, it should be done in kingdom work. When I think of monitoring, I think of a road trip that we went on recently where we didn't inspect so well. And we learned that we do need to inspect the tires, the fluids, the oil, everything. We need to inspect those things before we go on a road trip. So why not more so in ministry that God's entrusted us with?
That is a really good example.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what happened when we didn't plan well.
How many of us have just hopped in the car and went somewhere, especially on a road trip like what you just described, and then find out, oh my goodness, the oil's low or whatever.
Yes.
When we monitor our ministry, one of the primary objectives is to obtain what I like to call relative certainty. Nobody likes to be micromanaged.
Yeah.
In other words, in ministry, I don't want to have such a high level of inspection that people feel like I'm big brother or kind of lurking over their shoulders. We want there to be freedom in ministry and people platformed and given the authority and equipped for ministry. So I like this term relative certainty because then I can report with absolute confidence to my supervisor, a board, others around me, what's going on in ministry, and I'm relatively certain of what's going on.
Right.
Then if I need to find out the facts of a particular situation, I can investigate a little bit further. But the whole idea is that we become relatively certain that my intention is being accomplished.
It's good. Yeah, it's really good.
So how do I obtain then relative certainty in ministry? Well, there's kind of 2 different aspects of that. I need statistical information, numbers, facts. How many kindergartners do I have, or how many kids in the nursery compared to the ratio of parents, attendance, giving, things of that nature. But I also need to have stories. So if I don't have stats and stories, the combination of that, then it would be impossible for me to be relatively certain that my intent in ministry is being accomplished. So it's not one or the other, it's both and.
Mm-hmm.
We need the statistical information, so we have to monitor and get that information. But then I also have to be able to relate stories, life change stories, particular engagement type stories that people have with one another. How are we loving, serving, caring for one another, so on and so forth. Well, when I have both stats and stories, I'm definitely can be relatively certain. Does that make sense, Pam?
Absolutely. It sure does. Yeah.
One of the easiest ways to get things accomplished in any organization is to measure it. Because there's an old axiom that says this: what gets rewarded gets done.
Mm.
And there's another one too that you're going to talk about, but I know that rewards are kind of in the eye of the beholder similar to beauty's in the eye of the beholder, or one man's junk is another man's treasure,
Right.
that kind of thing. So we've got some examples of rewards written down for you. You can come up with your own as well, but appreciation is a reward. Maybe spending time with somebody is a reward, acknowledgement, additional investment in them. Those are all rewards. And when we as human beings get rewarded for a specific behavior, we are much more inclined to repeat it.
Mm.
That happens from birth. Pam, I have a new grandbaby.
Mhm.
She's like 4 months old now. And she's getting to that point where if you do something and then she giggles, then you do it again and she gets, so that reward for her, she wants the adults, the parents, the grandparents around her to be happy. So she does certain things and then she gets rewarded. So it starts when we're just toddlers,
Mhm.
but it carries on through, obviously, at a higher sophistication level through adulthood.
That reminds me of the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. Remember we talked about that a while back?
We did.
Really, really appreciate that. That was helpful for our team to do. And it also, we know, like you say, whatever you reward gets repeated, and we want to continually do that. That's why it's important to have a goal or an objective, because you're going to measure towards something. Don't you think, Chris?
Yeah, that's great.
And we want to have reasonable goals and objectives, not so far-fetched that we can't accomplish those. And also, what gets measured gets done, like you said, Chris. And I've seen that at times when we don't measure, things just don't get done. We think they're getting done, but they're not. We don't have the facts. So I'm a huge fan, obviously, of Church Community Builder software, as I'm sure you are as well.
I know you are.
I am. Love it for countless reasons. But one of the features that we do have is a dashboard that leaders are just eating it up, because they're able to monitor what's most important to them in ministry. We don't want to measure everything, but we do want to measure what's most important. What are our objectives? Monitoring is good stewardship. Don't you agree?
Yeah. When we know the condition of our flock,
Yeah.
as the scriptures tell us to do, then not only do we have confidence, but we can report to others with confidence. And I tell you, confidence breeds confidence, which we'll talk more about later. But let me give you a couple of hot tips on this monitoring thing, and as it relates to us as pastors and church leaders. And really, one of them is, when it comes to monitoring well, thinking and feeling really don't matter.
That's right.
Because I can think something, but I need to verify it. Or if I feel a certain way, it could be because I'm off kilter a little bit, or even though we don't talk about it much, as pastors and church leaders, sometimes we have favorites, and we give a little bit more wobble room for the favorite than maybe somebody else. So we're really not talking about thinking and feeling, although I know as a pastor, I think and feel. You as a church leader, a pastor, you have thoughts and feelings. That's part of our makeup. But when it comes to monitoring, we have to set our thoughts and our feelings aside, and we need to verify and then look at reality. When we monitor, here's another hot tip. Sometimes we as pastors and church leaders, we look at monitoring statistics and things like that, and we put that on our people.
Yeah.
And that becomes a onerous thing for them. Jesus told us, my yoke isn't burdensome and heavy. It's light. It's easy. And so monitoring is really our scorecard, not our people's scorecard. And so we can look at that and know where we need to adjust in these other 4 categories. Am I recruiting the right people? Am I training them the right way? Do I have people in the right slots? If when we monitor, our intention's not being accomplished, then we can adjust one of these other 4 areas and then tweak things so that our intention is being accomplished. And then, man, one of the things Pam mentioned at Church Community Builder, our software is designed for you as a pastor, as a church leader, to not only monitor that well, but to help make the adjustments to get actually what you want, which is your intent.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier, Chris, that numbers are a part of a story. And it reminded me of when I was in Israel and we were hiking, and I saw this stack of stones. And
Wait. I got to back up. I'm so sorry. You got to go to Israel?
I did.
How long ago?
I went in 1985, right after I got saved. And you know my personality.
Yeah.
So I was reading the Bible and I shut it and said, I have to go there. I have to see this. I can't just read it.
Okay.
So I was on a flight, and about 6 weeks later.
Oh, great. I'll bet you'd recommend everybody goes to Israel.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's on my bucket list for our whole family to go.
Okay.
It's
Well, sorry about the
amazing.
sidetrack there,
No,
but I'm
it's
like, wow, that's
amazing.
cool.
And it does really make everything come alive. But I remember we were walking and I saw these stacks of stones. And so the tour guide we were with, I said, why are those there? And he said, when you see stones like this, it means that something happened. God did something in maybe in an ordinary day, but he came and did the extraordinary. And so it's an opportunity for, as you're walking, for you to stop and reflect and join in on that experience. And for them, it's holy ground. When you see the rocks, it's a symbol of holy ground. And those rocks tell a story. So he was able to share several stories with us. So before it was like, oh, a stack of rocks. Then once he told the story, every rock meant something. It's very meaningful.
Yeah, and I know that some personalities can get wrapped up in the number,
Right,
and some personalities get more wrapped up in the story.
right.
Well, the number reflects stories,
Mhm.
and then the stories are part of the number. So this kind of both and concept between stories and stats, I think, is so important for us as pastors and church leaders, because we don't want to be so numbers focused that we forget about people, because every number represents a story. And I know, Pam, that you are really big on the number of baptisms, the number of conversions, and tracking those things. But every baptism tells a story.
It does.
There is a remarkable God story, and usually an us story behind that too. Us as a church congregation, us as a community of faith within a city or whatever it might be.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just a quick reminder for those of you that might be more story oriented, remember there's a whole book in the Bible called Numbers.
That's true.
And if you read through the book of Acts almost really starts out with numbers.
Sure.
There were 120 up in the upper room.
Right.
There were, Peter preaches. It doesn't say how many thousands of people heard the message.
Right.
There could have been tens of thousands probably,
Mm.
but 3,000 people believed and then came to Christ. But here's the thing. A significantly higher number of people heard the story than that made a commitment to Christ, because if you go back and reread the story, some people scoffed about it. Some people didn't believe it. Some people just thought they were drunk.
Right.
There's a lot of different responses.
Mhm.
In other words, there's a lot of different stories
Mhm.
to the gospel message. And then, of course, what we're looking for is the people that the Holy Spirit has ready to receive that story. And then we want to record that somehow, know about that somehow. That's the number side of it. But we can't get so busy that we don't actually hear some of those stories and the remarkable life change that happens when the Holy Spirit indwells us. Oh, it gets me excited.
Yeah, I love that. It's good.
So how about a couple action items today, Pam? What can people do to anchor this idea of monitoring in their ministry?
Well, I think of a dashboard. Obviously, in our cars, we have a dashboard that I really rely on. I'm very, whatever it's telling me to do, I do it. If I see something go off, I know something needs to change. So here at Church Community Builder, we have an incredible dashboard of metrics that allows people to customize what they need to know about their ministry. So we're going to monitor things that not only are important to us, but also those things in our ministry that we want to capture, like you said, those numbers, those stories. Chris, I know that you've done this a lot. Can you give us a couple examples of that?
Well, first, let me tell you that it does take a little bit of time to hone in on what the most important ones are, or at least it did for me, because I used to try to monitor everything. And I would have lists, and I think I talked to you once, Pam, about I still have my calendars, and I would just record things numerically on the day in the calendar. And so my weekends were, of course, full of stats and all that. Some of it was meaningful and some of it wasn't. So as I became more experienced in ministry, what I began to hone in on were what are the 3 or 4 or maybe 5 at the most things that would tell me 80% of the story. That's that relative certainty piece that would let me know that things are going okay. And the number one thing that I ended up measuring as a pastor was this: retention rate. I measured retention rate in everything. Retention rate of new visitors, retention rate of volunteers, retention rate of participants in a particular program. People vote with their feet, so that retention rate let me know if I'm doing a good job in some other thing.
What'd you say? Say it again about the feet.
Well, people vote with their feet.
I love that.
I hate to admit this, but I want you to know in the ministry show audience here that none of us gets this right out of the gate. It comes with experience. early on in my small group ministry, this is funny now, but it was treacherous at the time. I used to make my small group leaders in quotes, come to a weekly meeting. So that meant that they had a weekly small group meeting, but they also had a weekly meeting with me. Can you imagine that? Oh my gosh. And so it took me a little bit of time to figure out that nobody wanted to come to my weekly meeting. Well, how did I know that? Well, it started off with a very high percentage of people coming, and that dwindled down to, the faithful few.
Yeah.
And so I asked the faithful few, well, what's going on? And they're like, looked at me like I was kind of, rookie pastor or whatever. Certainly not smart. Well, Chris, people don't like coming to this meeting. Can't you tell? The only reason I come to it is because you want me to, but I'd prefer not to be here. And so I ixnayed that's an old-fashioned term for I cut out the weekly meeting, started listening to those that I was ministering to, and they already kind of knew what they were doing and really honed in on meeting about 2 or 3 times a year for some additional training. So the monitoring, seeing that attendance at training meetings continue to go down, then going, well, what's wrong here? Well, what was wrong here was me. So anyway, the point being then that I just started monitoring retention rates in my training and adjusted my training so that it was meaningful to those that I was ministering with and to. And then the retention rate went way up. I had 85% of the people would come to my ongoing training. But, well, we can laugh at ourselves now, but at the time I was like disappointed, not in myself, Pam, and this is the problem. Yeah. I was disappointed in my people. Really what I need to do is look at myself and go, well, what are you doing wrong?
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying that monitoring is your scorecard, not your people's scorecard.
Right.
And of course, when I got that in balance and right, the attendance and ongoing training went through the roof. Right. So, hey, how about a quick preview for next week? We're going to continue to talk about monitoring, but how we can gain confidence when we know things that are going on in our ministry. We can confidently adapt, we can confidently change, or we can confidently move forward doing the same thing. Again, just a quick shout out to our sponsors, Aware 3 and Catalyst Church Creative. Russ and his team there have helped us immensely. They're a good group to connect with if you're trying to get the word out through anything digital, mobile, things of that nature. You can see also the slide for the upcoming Build Conference. Man, that's not too far away now. Go to buildgathering.com. You can find out more information about that and see the great groups of people that we have coming, really experts in just about every field in church ministry that will help not only you, but your team build a significant ministry that thrives. Well, listen, until next time, and we really appreciate you being part of the ministry show. We ask for God's blessing upon you, and we cannot wait to see you next time here on the ministry show. God bless.